I've seen countless teams lured into the trap of asynchronous and daily scrums by the false hope of improved efficiency. It's up to your team to select whatever structure and techniques that they want, but I want you forewarned of the pitfalls. For anyone wondering what the heck an asynchronous daily scrum even is, it's a method for offline meeting facilitation that has become popular amongst remote teams. Generally, an automated process posts a recurring prompt in the company messaging app, like Teams or Slack, and each developer responds to that prompt in their free time. There are different ways to manage the process. Some teams like to post updates in other tools like Jira or Confluence, or apps designed specifically for asynchronous meetings. What is essential is that there's no face to face communication, calendar appointments, or set communication time. The growing popularity of these meetings hinges on the assumption that removing them from everyone's calendars increases efficiency by reducing interruptions and granting the team more time to get work done. In instances where the Scrum team spans multiple time zones, this method circumvents the need to schedule a recurring meeting at a time inconvenient for some. Everyone can post their update whenever it best suits their schedule. Before you get too excited and jump straight onto this bandwagon, let's review several weaknesses of this approach. The first issue I have with asynchronous daily scrums is that they decrease team interdependence. Throughout my career, I've seen several teams set up in what I like to call the puppet master structure. The manager knows what needs to be done and has the big picture, if you will. Then they break that down into tasks and assign those tasks to individuals. These individual contributors eventually produce a product, but their vision is limited only to what they worked on. In many cases, they aren't familiar with how their work contributes to the overall goal because they're not really informed of the overall plan. They definitely don't know what other people on their team are working on, and it's not really relevant. Their boss has decomposed the overall project into pieces tailored to ensure no dependencies on other work. I'm probably not the only person to see teams like this out in the wild. What do you think happens to this team when their manager leaves? Alternatively, interdependent teams work together to build and understand the plan. Knowledge transfer happens naturally as a consequence of everyone working together toward a single goal. If one team member is out, others can cover. Everyone can see the big picture and they understand what they're working toward. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Now, the Scrum Guide doesn't come right out and say that teams should be interdependent, but it's strongly implied. Some form of the word collaborate is used 6 times throughout the document. The Scrum Guide has this to say about the Scrum team. It is a cohesive unit of professionals focused on one objective at a time, the product goal. Scrum teams are cross functional, meaning that members have all the skills necessary to create value each sprint. They are also self managing, meaning they internally decide who does what, when, and how. The Scrum team is small enough to remain nimble and large enough to complete significant work within a sprint, typically 10 or fewer people. You can't have 10 or fewer people creating a plan and working on a single goal and not be interdependent. If your team truly functions as described, synchronous daily scrums are a necessity to keep everyone aligned. If your team isn't interdependent, your biggest problem right now isn't the format of your daily stand up. A significant weakness of asynchronous daily scrum is that it flat out fails to satisfy the purpose of the daily scrum as specified in the Scrum Guide. The purpose of the daily scrum is to inspect progress toward the sprint goal and adapt the sprint backlog as necessary, adjusting the upcoming planned work. Another quote from the Scrum Guide tells us the developers can select whatever structure and techniques they want as long as their daily scrum focuses on progress toward the sprint goal and produces an actionable plan for the next day of work. What would this even look like in a messaging app? How would we asynchronously develop a plan for the day? I once worked with a team whose daily scrum was more of a status report meeting. Since all the time was spent reporting updates and guessing delivery dates, the individual contributors adjusted the sprint backlog as they deemed necessary without collaborating with other team members. We ended up with Jira issues all over the place, duplicates of user stories that already existed, shells of requirements that had so little information on them that even the creator couldn't remember when it was. Stories the team had finished a month ago remained open and relegated to the depths of a backlog that no one can make sense of. If they'd used the Daily Scrum to update the sprint backlog collaboratively, do you think they may have built a shared understanding of the plan and prevented the confusion? When the team uses the time to accomplish the intended objective of the event, they can gain a lot of value. But an asynchronous daily scrum almost certainly relegates the event to a status meeting, which is not valuable to the team. The next pitfall may seem counterintuitive, but an async daily scrum can actually introduce inefficiencies that will consume more of your team's time than the meeting you're seeking to replace. I recently went through a period of burnout in my current role, and I did a lot of research to determine how to solve my problem. I discovered this dude named Cal Newport, a computer science professor at Georgetown University and a New York Times bestselling author. He contends that society still struggles to uncover processes that support sustainable knowledge work. Being a Scrum Master isn't like working in a factory. There's a lot of critical thinking that happens all day long. The same is doubly true of a developer. Based on Cal's teachings, I've learned that burnout is caused by what I like to refer to as the toxic trifecta. This trifecta consists of three elements that, when combined, create a toxic work culture. The first is unlimited WIP, or work in progress. You have way too many balls in the air. The second is ad hoc requests. Anyone can throw more balls at you anytime they like. And the third is context shifting. You're so focused on keeping all the balls in the air that you can't really stop to dedicate time to any single task to complete it. So it becomes an endless struggle. Each context shift weakens your ability to adequately deal with the next task. Okay, so what does this have to do with the Daily Scrum? When we try to run this asynchronously, we only guarantee that more balls will come our way later. We now have this thread that any of our fellow developers could contribute to at any moment. If we're trying to be collaborative and use this to plan our day and make sure our teammates don't need help, our deep work sessions will be constantly interrupted by updates to this thread. The point of a daily Scrum meeting is to get in sync at the same time. A small amount of collaboration prevents a heap of inefficiencies. Another weakness of the asynchronous approach is that it's one step away from the Scrum team altogether abandoning the daily Scrum. I worked with one team that tried async stand-ups, and for the first few days, everyone diligently answered their three questions. Then one day, Harry forgot. Nothing terrible happened to Harry, so the next day, Harry forgot again. Still nothing terrible happened. The day after that, Harry had to choose between responding to this recurring Slack channel message or delivering valuable work to a customer. He decided to make the customer happy. At this point, Ron notices that Harry has stopped responding to the daily prompt. So he stops. Quickly after that, the entire team stopped responding to the three daily questions. These daily prompts continue to roll by like lonely tumbleweeds in a ghost town. This has happened on every team I've saw experiment with asynchronous daily scrums. More and more team members start slacking off on responding to the prompt until no one remains. If you've ever felt like smacking a slacker, consider smacking the like button instead. It helps this video reach more people so that they too can learn tactics to prevent violence against slackers. Seriously though, you could combat this behavior by having Hermione berate people for not responding to the thread, but very quickly she'll have just as much time in this activity as the alternative 15-minute daily meeting. Stalking is a waste of time. Why not just have the meeting instead? The next qualm I have with asynchronous daily scrums is that many teams use them to obfuscate a larger problem. In an episode of the Agile Mentors podcast, which I'll link to in the description, Brian Milner tells a story of a team that decided to kill their daily scrum. They felt that the meeting was a waste of time, and after attending one, Brian agreed. He did convince them, though, that to avoid drawing attention to themselves from the other Agile teams, they needed to still gather in the conference room for 15 minutes as if they were still running the event. Instead of doing the daily scrum, the team would talk about anything they needed to discuss to help plan that day's work. The team found this time spent planning for the next day to be super valuable, and they were so glad that they decided to kill the daily scrum. Otherwise, they would have never unlocked this opportunity to solidify their plan for the next 24 hours. After a couple of days, Brian eventually admitted to them that the meeting they now loved and found so valuable was actually a daily scrum. And what they were doing before was a dysfunctional status meeting. There are several dysfunctions that agile teams might have that will cause the daily scrum to be less valuable than it could be. Changing the daily scrum to account for these dysfunctions only sweeps the problems under the rug. Teams that switch to an asynchronous daily scrum to compensate for a more profound issue are misplacing their efforts and obfuscating the real problem. And the last pitfall for asynchronous daily scrums is that they remove the human element. Now, if you're an introvert like me, you probably think that's a reason to party. The less people I have to be around, the better. But even I can admit that there are benefits in getting to know your team members. The book, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, teaches us that lack of trust is the primary issue in teams that sets the basis for other problems to thrive. How do you build trust? You get to know one another. How do you get to know each other? By spending time together. When left in its face to face or virtual face to face format, the Daily Scrum can help build valuable personal connections amongst the team members over time. This serendipitous bonus is lost when we switch to an asynchronous stand up meeting. All knowledge is built one piece at a time. If you'd like another piece, watch this video on avoiding daily scrum overrun. Sticking to the 15-minute time box may make synchronous events more appealing. I'll see you over there. Cheers.